Chapter 16 On Hate. Jessica B. began her Monday morning session by telling me about her weekend. She and her husband Paul had left their 4-year-old daughter with her parents, then gone up to Cambridge to pitch for an architectural project. Paul suggested that they stay overnight, and their client, a university college, had organized for them to stay in an historic building. Medieval, timber-framed, with this fantastic original fireplace, Jessica told me. It was perfectly cozy. The pitch had gone well, and Paul wanted to celebrate. He prepared a romantic dinner for 2 and lit a fire. Jessica took a bath, then came out to find Paul in the cashmere jumper she had bought him for Christmas. He looked so cuddly. They ate dinner and snuggled up in front of the fire. It was lovely. I know Paul wanted to have sex, but I just didn't feel like it. I wish I did, but I didn't. He didn't get annoyed with me. He's a real sweetie. Something in the way she said it, sweetie, grated on me. "Can you hear the words you're using?" I said. Cuddly, snuggle, sweetie. These are words we might use to describe a child, not a man who wants to have sex. "Sweetie is what I call Paul. Do you want me to use other words?" "No," I told her. I wanted her to use her own words, but I thought her words suggested that she desexualized Paul. "Perhaps," she said. Last week in the supermarket car park, she had seen a man she'd had a crush on at university. They didn't date. She didn't know him well, but there he was, helping 2 small kids out of a car. He was still athletic and tall. Seeing him now with his children, Jessica found him even more attractive. Since that moment in the car park, she had imagined what it would be like to have an affair with him. She went silent. Previously she'd told me that Paul worked out and took care of himself. She thought he was still attractive, but she didn't feel attracted to him. I said, "What I'm trying to understand is why Paul is now cuddly, a sweetie, and this man in the car park athletic and tall." She couldn't explain. Jessica remembered collecting Paul from Heathrow several weeks earlier. He'd been away on a site visit for 2 days, and she had missed him. In the taxi home, she pulled him close and started to kiss him. But when he reciprocated her kiss, she heard herself tell Paul he should do up his seatbelt. "It's me," Jessica said. "I shut off." She remembered when they were first dating, a taxi ride from a West End restaurant to Paul's flat. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. But dating made her edgy. In some ways it was one of the most anxious periods in her life. There were days when she was convinced that Paul was looking to find someone sexier, more successful. Was he waiting for something better to turn up? She had hated the uncertainty. As I listened, I thought about our first meeting. Jessica had been referred to me several months earlier by her doctor. He said she was overwhelmed balancing work and family and taking care of her aging parents. During that first meeting, she told me that she didn't understand why her marriage had become so cold. She and Paul were barely having sex. Her problem was common enough, and has been discussed by psychoanalysts for 100 years. Freud described this predicament as second only to anxiety in causing misery to his patients. Where they love, they do not desire, and where they desire, they cannot love, he wrote. There are many reasons this dilemma can develop in a person, and many solutions. Jessica behaved like the patients Freud described, but after 3 months of psychoanalysis, I didn't know why. Trying to talk with her about this seemed to have no effect. I felt I was getting nowhere. Reluctant to repeat my ideas or go over old ground, I was quiet until the end of her session, when she gathered her things and left. Unusually, Jessica missed her session the next day. She left a telephone message saying that she wouldn't be in all that week, and that she'd explain when she next saw me. The following Monday she arrived late. It turned out that she and Paul hadn't got the Cambridge job. She told me that the whole week had been so busy that she hadn't had time to think about it or come to her sessions. She and Paul had been counting on the job financially. It was a big project for the firm. She felt their design was the best. "I've just been so down," she said. "I'm struck that you didn't think of telephoning me when you felt so down." "I didn't know you needed me so much," she said, and laughed. "Weren't your other patients bringing you enough problems?" Listening to Jessica, it occurred to me that she wanted to feel that she was the busy mother, and I, along with her husband, was another demanding child. I told her this, and reminded her of something she had told me early on with evident pride. Her weight rarely changed. She could control her hunger. She had confided that it made her feel a bit high not to eat, especially when others were tucking in. "That's just how I am," she said. "Do you want me to be like most people and comfort eat when I'm down?" I told her that I was raising the question in light of our talking about sex last week, that I wondered if ignoring her sexual hunger helped her to feel a bit better, gave her a lift. My question annoyed Jessica. She left without saying goodbye. The next day she returned and told me that, while there might be something in what I was saying, it didn't explain why she and Paul had stopped having sex. I asked if she could remember what had happened. Was there something specific that might have caused her to go off Paul? "It was after her daughter Phoebe was born," she said. "That's natural, I suppose. I was completely sleep-deprived, leaking breast milk, and I felt that if I lost one more night's sleep I might go crazy. The last thing I wanted was sex." She remembered one particular night. Phoebe wasn't eating solids yet. She must have been just about 6 months old. Jessica was still breastfeeding. She was trying to get Phoebe onto a schedule to sleep through the night. She had fed her at 10 and put her down. Around midnight, Phoebe began to cry. Jessica thought that she should just be rocked back to sleep. Paul rocked her for a long time, but Phoebe wouldn't be calmed. He was convinced that she needed more milk. Jessica and Paul got into a terrible fight. She felt he wasn't supporting her in trying to get Phoebe onto a regular schedule, that he was undermining her. He said that if she didn't feed Phoebe, he was going to get some expressed milk out of the freezer and do it himself, and he did. It turned out he was right. For some reason, Phoebe was still hungry. I thought she could settle herself, self-soothe. The night got worse. Phoebe fell deeply asleep. They went back to bed, and Jessica began to cry. She expected Paul would put his arms around her, but he rolled over, turning his back. I asked him why he wouldn't cuddle me, and he said, "I thought you should self-soothe." I was awake all night, furious with both Phoebe and Paul. I hated them both. Jessica sighed. She told me that before she got pregnant, she had always imagined that she would know just what to do. She thought she would be a good mum, certainly better than her own mother, better than most of her friends, and that having a baby would strengthen her relationship with Paul. "You hoped having a baby would undo the unhappiness of your own childhood," I said. "I thought I'd find a kind of love with my baby that I'd never known before," she said. "A shared warmth, an understanding," she replied. "And I did, but I didn't know a tiny baby could also make me feel so angry." When Phoebe wouldn't sleep, or once when she bit another baby in the sandpit, Jessica found herself wildly angry. Phoebe's crying was particularly difficult. She howled, and every time she howled it was as if she was saying I was a terrible mother. I didn't do anything, I didn't grab or shake her, but I felt I could. It was awful. Jessica shifted on the couch. "I always thought I was a nice person," she said, "until I had a baby." At times, when she felt bad about herself, she wanted Paul to support her, to reassure her that she was a good mother. When Paul's thinking differed from hers, she couldn't bear it. It felt like he was criticizing her too. Looking back now, Jessica realized that she'd always quickly recovered her affectionate feelings for Phoebe, but not for Paul. I told her that she might be using Paul. If Paul was the problem, she could still think of herself as a good mum and Phoebe as a good baby. Unexpectedly, Jessica sat up on the couch. She remembered something more. One day, in their kitchen, she was having tea with a friend, and Paul pulled a chair up to the table. As he did, Phoebe, who was sitting in Jessica's lap, reached out to grab at Jessica's mug, knocking it to the floor. It shattered. I shouted at Paul, called him an idiot. My friend burst out laughing. I really believed that the way Paul sat down had caused Phoebe to break my favorite mug. Your first impulse was to blame Paul, hate him, so that you didn't hate Phoebe. It'll be hard to desire Paul if you're finding it useful to hate him. Raising her hands to her face, Jessica made a sound I didn't recognize at first. I'd never heard her cry. At the end of the session, as Jessica stood to leave, I remembered my impatience with the word sweetie. Sweetie wasn't a sign of intimacy or love. It was sugar-coated hate. There is one more thing to add. A few weeks later, at work, Jessica saw Paul preparing for a client presentation with his assistant, a bright, pretty trainee architect. Jessica had never really noticed them together, but now, watching from her desk, she saw them in the meeting room, the way they touched each other when they spoke, the way they both laughed at something he had said. And she really, really wanted him.